Hello everyone, Buddy here at House of Props, and to accompany the arrows from my previous video, I'm going to make a bow inspired by the one Hawkeye uses in his new series. You can find the link to the template in the below description so you can build this project right along with me. Let's get building and see if it will actually shoot. To begin, I traced the grip template onto 1/2 inch thick pieces of scrap wood I had lying about. This template can be scaled up if you need a bigger bow, or it can be scaled down for kid size. Hit those subscribe and notification buttons so you can be notified as soon as I drop a new video. Or scan this code to see my previous builds. To cut the wood, I used a bandsaw, which I do not have, but I was able to use the one at my job. Make sure when you're operating with machinery, you wear the appropriate protection. The pieces were then glued together with wood glue. And when the wood glue had dried, I used my rotary tool with an 80 grit sanding drum to round and smooth all the edges. When finished with the 80 grit, I repeated the process with a 120 grit sandy drum. I used Bondo glazing and spot putty to fill in the seams where the wood pieces were joined. After the spot putty dried, I smoothed it with 180 grit sandpaper. To remove the cutouts, I started by drilling holes into each area that needed to be removed. This will allow a jigsaw blade to fit without damaging the rest of the grip. Initially, I tried to create the rest of the bow with PVC pipe. I heated it up and shaped it, only to find this was an epic fail. The PVC just didn't have the tension needed to propel an arrow. So, I switched to using 2 aluminum rulers, which were 48 inches long and about 1/8 an inch thick. These were trimmed down to 27 inches long and then shaped to the curve provided in the template. I marked the placement for 2 drill holes 4 inches apart on each ruler. I start with a 3/16 drill bit and then change to a 1/4 inch bit. You want to keep the drill as straight as possible and apply good pressure. Proceed to the other holes. Before attaching the rulers, I used the 3/16 drill bit and drilled the wooden grip in spots which would line up with the ruler holes. These holes were only about a 1/4 inch deep. To attach each ruler, I used 2 14 by 3/4 pan Phillips sheet metal screws. Then I marked the ends of the rulers to match the template and trimmed away the aluminum to get a curved shape on each end. The edges are a little rough, so I attached 80 grit and 120 grit sandpapers to either side of a paint stirrer and proceeded to smooth the edges of the cuts. Using pieces of 10mm foam, I filled in both of the larger triangular shapes. These don't need to fill the holes completely. In fact, you want there to be a noticeable difference in the height of the surfaces. Just make sure to center these pieces so it is even on each side. I then use CA glue to secure these into place. Next, I cut 4 1.25" circles out of 6mm foam and smoothed the cut edges with my rotary tool. These are then glued into place with CA glue. To create the hinges, I traced the template 18 times onto 2mm foam. These are glued together so the round end meets with the rounded end of another while alternating the direction of the pointed ends. In the end, you are left with a hinge which is non-functional, but will give the desired effect. These are then centered on the mark about 16 inches from the end that attaches to the grip. To create the sight, I took a 2-inch wide strip of 2mm foam and glued this around the center of a 2.5-inch long piece of 1/2-inch PVC pipe. On each end of the pipe, I attached a 3/4-inch circle of 6mm foam. I used scraps of 6mm foam to create the sticky up parts on the circles. Around the center, I attached a 3/4-inch by 3 3/4-inch strip of 2mm foam. If the pieces create a seam or there is a gap, this edge will be placed against the bow. Then around each end, I attached a strip of 3/4-inch by 3 3/4-inch 2mm foam. Once the glue dried, I used my rotary tool to smooth off any seams which overlapped. This is then glued onto the grip just above this small curve. When that was secure, I took a 2mm foam strip which was a 1/2 inch wide and 4.5 inches long, rounded its ends, and glued this to the grip and sight. To create the screw heads which hold this in place, I used a standard hole punch and cut 2 pieces out of 2mm foam. These are then glued into place on either end of the strip. And a hobby knife is used to slice the tops. This cut will open up with heat and create a screw head shape. To prepare the foam for painting, I used a heat gun to seal all the foam pieces. The entire bow is then coated in Plast Dip because it has flex when it's dry, and it will flex with the bow. Make sure to build up an even coat with thin layers. This will keep the Plast Dip smooth and less likely to drip. Once the Plast Dip has dried, I wrapped the grip with 3/8 inch wide strips of 2mm foam. Then I mixed up a light gray acrylic and painted the grip. The triangular foam pieces are also painted with this gray. As well as the center of the foam circles. To create the bowstring, I'm using a thing called tie line. We use this in theater a lot because it is a woven cord which makes it relatively sturdy and durable. You can also use a different material for the string if you wish, just make sure it is sturdy without a lot of stretch. I make a loop which will fit the ends of the bow, and using a needle with black thread, sew the tie line to itself. Then wrap the excess thread around the sewn area and tie it off. The bowstring is then just slipped over the ends and sits in the notches. So those are the steps I used to make this Hawkeye themed bow. I'm going to take some of these arrows from a previous build and let's head outside to see how this thing shoots. Each time I would shoot the arrow, I would get a different distance, but the average was about 30 feet. So I'm very happy with the results. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you are enjoying these videos, be sure to give them a thumbs up and subscribe. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.